D-Man got fame. What's going on, Clarence?
Cornmeal.
Let's do it. D-Man alright. Whoa. D-Man alright. Spicy Mafia. Alright. Spicy Mafia. You gotta keep it spicy. If you see a queen, you better wife it. While we little than a lighter, it makes things much brighter. That's why you gotta keep it spicy. You gotta keep it spicy.
All right, so we are back with the great Jonald Fyookball. He is a thought leader. He is, of course, a developer par excellence for Bitcoin Cash, especially. But before we get into what he's working on now and what's got the space all lit up, really across platforms, which is kind of interesting, is his work in CashFusion. But before we dive into that, first off, Jonald, Happy New Year, man.
Yeah, man. Happy New Year. Thanks, Edward. 2020, man. It's future's here.
It really is, and I don't think any of us are ready for it after that 2019. That was pretty brutal.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, what a year. So all right, we're starting
It
off.
it was a good year though. I mean, if there was a post with all the a lot of the things that happened in the Bitcoin Cash community, 2019, and I think it's pretty impressive to look back and and see, like, despite all the drama, all the bear market, all the whatever, we just kept our nose to the grindstone and just kept building as a community. So that's awesome, and I want to thank everyone in the community who's been part of that. And I think we're just, if we keep on building, we're going to be in a good place. Maybe not not immediately with the price, but eventually, you can't stop an idea whose time has come.
And I appreciate your bullishness, because I think it comes from a learned place. And the crypto ecosystem is filled with hype men and hopium peddlers, and I've never found you to be that way. I found you to be very realistic about things. So that's good to hear. What I am very eager to talk to you about is something that CoinSpice has been monitoring. Then I was kind of looking back at our archives here. I want to say May of 2019. We started writing a little bit about CashFusion. It was sort of on the hype of or on the hope, I guess, of Cash Shuffle. So this may get a little confusing for listeners, but the idea in Bitcoin, I guess, has been there's kind of a meme that runs the gamut that somehow Bitcoin was anonymous, and that went on for a while. The mainstream media really took it and turned it into this weird thing where I think a lot of people were badly fooled by the idea that Bitcoin was anonymous. It is certainly about the furthest thing you can be from anonymous, in that there's a public record of your transaction there. So I'm not sure how that exactly took off, but it did in any event. And then the slow, subtle realization that that's not the case hit some people very, very hard. There were scams and all sorts of prosecutions based on chain analysis and so forth. And so the privacy idea then is important, and it's super important to, I guess, first divorce from criminality. So why I think the basic kind of first question is, if I'm not doing anything wrong, is sort of the old cliche, why should I worry about privacy, transaction privacies, especially with regard to Bitcoin?
Right. So yeah, just to speak to your first point, it's kind of interesting. Like the Bitcoin white paper kind of describes the difference between the Bitcoin privacy model and the traditional privacy model. So in Bitcoin, you don't necessarily have like an identity tied to each address, but on the other hand, everything is public on the blockchain. So I think when Bitcoin first got started, there was the general sense that you kind of spoke to, that hey, there's no names attached to these. It's just all these addresses. No one could possibly decipher that, right? But then you have these chain analysis companies that are doing this rigorous analysis, and then and then there's this generalization, that everyone is starting to have, like, oh, wait a sec, you can sort of track things if you have these companies that have this awesome software to kind of figure it out, right?
And there's a real danger. I mean, I'm not trying to just hype it up to make it,
Oh yeah,
fun listening. I mean, there's some fellas that, 2 years ago did some junk on the dark web, rather innocently, on one of these sites or whatever, and it's coming back to bite them in the ass, right?
I haven't heard about that in particular, but I'm sure I'm sure there's many cases like that.
Right.
But yeah, in terms of like privacy, yeah, it's not even about hiding something. I mean, just a basic Bitcoin blockchain. It's so transparent that you should be able to make a purchase and not have everyone in the world like see, like, oh, I went to the doctor and I paid for this, or you know what I mean, or just you don't want your neighbors necessarily knowing what you're spending your money on. It's not even about like hiding from the government necessarily, although I think privacy is a right. So there's all kinds of reasons why you would want to have some financial privacy, even if you're not a criminal.
Right. And
most people aren't criminals, so I think most people,
right.
Yeah, it's for everyone.
Yeah, and there's an automatic tension, I think, because a distributed, public ledger, the idea is transparency, and kind of openness. And I think introducing cash-like aspects into it, when you talk about privacy, I think most people are interested in it, piqued by it, but they're usually shouted down by sort of law enforcement types, cop
right.
lovers and so on, who are just really into this whole, we should all be monitoring each other and watching each other and so on.
Yeah. So, isn't that like from that, I don't know, whether it's 1984 or those different books about it? It's just like, we don't want to live in a surveillance state. At least I don't. So
yeah. And it's super topical. I mean, that's the whole, surveillance capitalism is another kind of cliche that's out there now. And a lot of people are talking about it and the horrors of tech and all this other stuff. And it would seem that probably the use case that needs to be solved is, or I guess put forward, is this idea of a cash-like kind of transaction anonymity that you can go into a store, say with your fiat dollar bills, your government bills, buy your alcohol, your oranges, whatever you're buying, and leave without having to give over, your geographic location, your name, potentially your address and everything else. It just seems to me to be kind of a no-brainer that some people should be working on this. And what I guess what attracts you to that? I guess you sort of said it, but you said privacy is a right. But what kind of attracts you in particular? Because you went from Cash Shuffle now to CashFusion. But what attracts you to the privacy idea in spending?
Yeah, so I think it's just one of the obvious ways to make Bitcoin better. So, we started in 2017 with Bitcoin Cash, and people had always talked about privacy and CoinJoin, and there was these different things. And so Cash Shuffle started as like a research project where I was just trying to figure out like can we add privacy and fungibility also. I think that's just as important, the fungibility aspect. We don't want, if we're creating this money for the world, we don't want one coin to be no good anymore because it got on a blacklist or something like that. That's not, a good property of money. So
this is,
and it goes back to what you were saying at the beginning, where we kind of all thought Bitcoin was private. Same thing with fungibility. We kind of all thought that Bitcoins are fungible, and then as time went on, we're like, well, is it really that fungible if one UTXO can get like blacklisted or something? So and that's kind of what interested me, just like making Bitcoin more of a better money, really.
Yeah, that really is something that a lot of people I'm kind of finding didn't realize, that they're called tainted coins. And I can envision a universe where very quickly, where exchanges or onboards and off ramps and so on to fiat, or however you even in transactions where, they simply will not take them because they've been put through, what would be like a coin join, like, mixer or whatever. And they're thought to be tainted. So that's a real issue, the fungibility side, right?
Right. Well, I wasn't even meaning like if it was through a mixer, just if it was through, if it was associated with someone, or I don't know. But and then in terms of mixing, like if the idea would be that if everyone is, or not necessarily everyone, but a lot of people are doing these coin joins and mixing different coins, then it gets really hard to ban mixed coins, because almost every coin is going to be touched at some point. So, it's like
it's sort of hiding in plain sight, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with the privacy issue, there was the Moneros of the world, some other projects, but Monero's probably the most well known, where they actually tried to develop a coin around the idea. And that seems to be easily censored, right? So governments are literally passing laws against it. Exchanges will not, take it. Some people won't traffic in it just by virtue of that. So it seems to me to develop a coin specifically around where its position is private is kind of bad OPSEC and bad PR. So Bitcoin Cash then comes on as a couple of years ago as sort of the cash meme, the medium of exchange idea. And, it's encouraged to be spent and used and employees to be remunerated in it, to develop an economy around it. But then we want the privacy aspect as well. So there's sometimes when you don't want privacy, you want it known that you made this payment. And other times when maybe you're not so keen to that. Is that what we're sort of getting to now?
Yeah, it's good that it's CashFusion is like an optional thing, and it's a little bit interesting as far as the pushback that you mentioned, because CashFusion is not baked into the base protocol layer of Bitcoin Cash. It's on the kind of on the wallet layer. So we'll have to see how that plays out, like whether it's going to be more regulation friendly because it's not baked into the protocol. I mean, so far that's kind of what it's looking like. But if CashFusion gets widespread, maybe there'll be a similar pushback. So, but my attitude is like, we're not going to just, we can't do things like hurt fungibility just to hope to please some regulators. We're going to have to move ahead with the best kind of money we can. And it's just, there could be, there could be a battle there, but it's kind of interesting because there was a show on, I think it's RT, which stands for Russian Times or something like that, where they were talking about, and someone on Reddit was like criticizing Roger Ver for being on there because it's like, oh, that place is like, it's Russian media or whatever. And what's interesting is that it's like, maybe the Russian government likes it because it's kind of like hurting the US dollar. So we're seeing this kind of like this game theory play out where unless all the nations of the world ban it at the same time, there's going to be this competition where some countries embrace crypto, even as others are trying to stop it. And I think it's like, you can't stop crypto. It's the Nash equilibrium of the game theory is such that it's just going to have to. It's like the countries that try to ban it are just going to get left behind. So
that's a brilliant point. It's sort of like pushing on a balloon, where you believe you're making a real impact in one area, you're just kind of inflating it on the other side, where people need it. But
we're all like, it's so like we're only 10 years into this crypto thing, and the grand scheme of history, that's a drop in the bucket. So, I think we should just build the best money we can, and we'll just have to see how the politics, how the geopolitical landscape ends up. But
so
last I'm
year,
hopeful that people are just going to get more woke over the years, over the generations, and we're just going to have good money.
I think so, and I think it's going to prove itself, within the street. So, getting back a little bit to last year, Cash Shuffle came online, and I think it was very successful. There was some large volume shuffles. There was Shuffle Saturday that was going on for a while. I think people like the social aspect of it. They like being part of a tech that had been audited and that seemed to run well, perform well. What did you learn from Cash Shuffle being in the wild that informs now CashFusion?
Yeah, I agree. It was a successful project, and I was a little worried about the liquidity aspect of it. Like, would there be enough people online at the same time or whatever? And so the way we solved that was just to kind of make it kind of happen in the background, where people would just be expected to leave their wallet open on their desktop, and it would just kind of do its thing in the background. And it's turned out to actually work in practice. So that's a really good thing.
And people there literally shuffle their coins with other people's coins, and then therefore it creates a greater, I guess, transaction anonymity. But there are some problems when they go to, I guess, spend it again or use it again. The anonymity aspects of it can be, I guess, mitigated, right?
Yeah. So the biggest problem with Cash Shuffle is that is like the change outputs. So you mix, let's say everyone gets a 0.1 BCH output from, you mix with 5 other, or 4 other people. So you're a group of 5 people, and that's fine. So, you can't really tell which 0.1 output was yours, but then you also have a change output usually. And then the problem is if you combine that change with one of your other outputs, then it kind of becomes susceptible to analysis, because you can kind of subtract. It's just basic subtraction. If you started with like a 0.18 and then you got a 0.08 change, you can tell that your 0.08 change was associated with that 0.18 input to begin with. So if you spend that 0.08 with the so-called anonymous 0.1, then you can just kind of like reverse engineer it. And it's the same thing with how it maybe we'll think, oh, well, no one's going to go to all that trouble to do that. But it's kind of like an arms race. So the chain analysis companies, I'm sure, would be able to catch up and figure that out. So and then also when you do that, you reduce the anonymity of the other people in that round of shuffling. So CashFusion kind of started as an attempt to fix this problem. It was like, we need to be able to consolidate different coins. So if I could back up a step, like if you only spend one coin, if you only spent the 0.1 that was anonymous and you didn't combine that would be pretty good, because then you really don't know like whose coin that was. So the idea, the original idea behind Cash Shuffle was, can we make a way that we can consolidate different, like multiple coins and kind of put them together? So, aka fusion or fusing them together. And so it kind of started out at that, but it's evolved a little bit to the point where now CashFusion is almost like a general purpose privacy tool, or like a way to do coin joins with an arbitrary number of inputs and outputs, and also like arbitrary amounts. So I think that's where it's evolved to, is kind of part of the reason why some people are getting so excited about it.
Yeah, that was really interesting. What because I tend to follow your work, that of Mark Lindeberg and Josh and some other people, and it's sort of in the zeitgeist. I sort of take it for granted, but when I saw it break out of the Bitcoin Cash community, and I believe it was the Wasabi Wallet guys who were like, wait, whoa, this looks pretty freaking cool. And then it's also made its way out beyond the CoinSpice, Bitcoin.com news into other areas where, people who are just straight investors who are looking for advantages in terms of coins they are now pointing to it, the potential of CashFusion as being a real game changer. What do you think? You kind of explained it, but what do you think excites people who are not Bitcoin cashers about this CashFusion idea?
Yeah, it's a good question. So yeah, just to put a cap on that last point that I was saying, it's some people think that, oh, well, you would use Cash Shuffle to like mix your coins, and then you would use Fusion to consolidate them, but that's not really. It's not really. We almost don't need Cash Shuffle anymore. We may decide to keep it around just because people like it or it has lower fees, but really CashFusion is kind of like its own beast now, and it would be enough just to have CashFusion because like it kind of does it all. It does like, you know, fanning in, meaning you're taking a bunch of UTXOs and making less of them, like consolidating, or you can fan out, like taking one coin and splitting it into a bunch of private UTXOs. And it can be fanning, like some people can be fanning in and others can be fanning out within the same transaction. So you really don't know. And that kind of leads to the next point of, you know, you asked, why are people so excited? And so I think the Wasabi dev, Nopara, sounded like he was excited about it because of the kind of the mathematical aspect, like the combinatorics, like how many different combinations there are, and that's
he was almost disbelieving, right? He was like, "Oh, I don't know."
Right. So there's really two things that CashFusion solves. One is like how to do trustless coordination. Like how do you have it so that even the participants themselves don't know who are all the other people, and you know, like making sure like no one knows any information about the other people's transactions. And then the other part is like the blockchain analysis part. Like how do you know, once it's on the blockchain, how do you make it so it's like you can't figure out anything? So I think most people are kind of interested in that second part. I'm kind of more interested in the first part because that's kind of what I worked on more. And that's fine that people aren't excited about that. But what I would say is that, you know, the one of the reasons CashFusion is so cool is not only do you get these like ginormous CashFusion transactions that you can see in the Block Explorer, but those transactions were made in such a way that none of the participants knew anything about the other people, and the server even doesn't know anything about the other people. And then at the same time, it still has some like denial of service protection built in, so that you can actually identify if someone is malicious and doesn't sign all their inputs or something.
That was my next question. This is witchcraft, yeah. Jonald.
Yeah,
you're a witch.
So this was like, it just kind of started out as this idea of like, it kind of gets into it's kind of a form of multi-party computation, which is a branch of cryptography. So it's not really doing the full-blown multi-party computation like you would traditionally think, which is kind of built on a circuit, so to speak, of like different. It's kind of like a very advanced way to do like Shamir secret sharing. So it's not. But those kind of circuits can end up being like thousands of operations and stuff. So we kind of did it in a more primitive way, but I think in a way that is more practical and more efficient. So I won't get into all that stuff because I think it'll just be kind of boring for a lot of people. But there's like some like each component, either input or output, is hashed, and then you have another hash of the salt value that was used to hash it, and then you have some Peterson commitments, and then you have some other things like some blind signature token stuff that Mark came up with. And so there's all these like pieces that are put together so that no one knows anything, but at the same time you can blame someone. Anyway, then the other part of that is like the combinatorics part. I think that's what this Wasabi guys were so excited about. Now it sounds really counterintuitive. Like how can you have it so that it's still private, right? But there's certain
so
things
you're talking about incorporating the Tor browser, right?
So I'll get to Tor in a minute.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just talking about like the question of like how is it really private if you can like can't you just like add up some inputs and like see which outputs they correspond to?
Right.
And so like there's certain things in math that are a little bit counterintuitive. So just as an example, I don't know if you've heard of like the birthday paradox. And like you might have heard of like birthday collisions and stuff like that when people talk about cryptography. And this is not really related, just an example of how certain things can be counterintuitive. Anyway, if you take like a number and you take like the square root of that, so like the square root of like 365, because there's 365 days in a year, 365 unique birthdays, ends up being something like 23. So that means if you have like a group of 23 people, there's like a 50-50 chance that someone's going to have the same birthday as someone else, which sounds weird, right? Because you're like, oh, it's only 23 people. Like, how can it doesn't seem likely that people would have the same birthday. But
I'm with you.
Counted, right? So there's a similar thing with, and I think it's like people have talked about the knapsack problem, which was kind of a combinatorics problem. But just as like a mini example, and I should probably give you the link somewhere for this, but this was based on Mark's work, but I took his code and I put it into like a GitHub gist, and you can see it. And it has like kind of a mini simulation where there's like only 3 players in the mix, and then each person has 6 inputs and 1 output. So in this example, like the sums of those inputs would either be like 476 or 590 or 514. And there's actually like 67 different ways that you can combine these like 6 inputs from each person to get those exact amounts, which is really counterintuitive. You're like, wow, there's only like 18 input values, like 6 times 3. How can it be like 67 different ways where they can add up to the same amount?
Right.
So it's kind of like some really freaky math that Mark came up with. I don't know what the name of the idea is, but it's just combinatorics, and it's pretty cool. So I think Mark is going to try to maybe write up some more thoughts on the math. The exact, like, proving it with the exact math is kind of complicated. I was doing some I tried to do some calculations just on like the number of possible combinations, and there's something called Stirling numbers, which you can look up, but bottom line is there's like in some of these fusion transactions, like just the total number of like combinations you'd have to check for is like 10 to the 120th power, which is like more atoms than there are in the universe. So
wow.
And then basically what Mark is saying is, and he can describe this more when he writes it up, but it's like, okay, even if like the exact combinations of the sums are going to be rare, like because we have like 8 decimal places in a Bitcoin amount, you're starting with such a huge number. So even if it's like 10 to the 100, the number of ways that it can line up to the exact amounts is there's still gonna be a lot of them, like 10 to the 20th or something like that. So he's saying, like, quote unquote, even with infinite computing power, there'd still be a large number of valid partitions.
Wow.
So that's kind of what it's all about.
And you're speaking here of the work of Mark B. Lundeberg. How you've definitely given the detail here, but how integral has he been in pushing CashFusion forward?
Oh, huge. Not only did he come up with some of the ideas that we used, but he also coded the whole thing, both the client and the server, and he's just phenomenal. So yeah, Mark is a real blessing for the Bitcoin Cash community.
Wow. Yeah, he's been involved with Bitcoin ABC for a while, and he's been floating around a number of projects. I know he took a major interest in atomic swaps early on and so on. So this seems kind of all to be sort of working towards a natural outgrowth of some of his earlier ideas. So really, really awesome. But I interrupted your thought there just to make sure we gave a nice shout out to Mark. So is Cash Shuffle? I know the answer, but is Cash Shuffle, is it live now? Is it working now? Is it something that people can visit and test?
So CashFusion. So
CashFusion. Sorry.
Yeah. So we have an alpha client that's not open to the public yet, but we'll be testing it with I don't know, maybe a dozen people or so, and we're doing fusions like almost every day, and it seems to work great. So again, big kudos, thank you to Mark Lundeberg for getting that coded up, and it seems to be working really well. Now with the Tor thing, so let me explain with the Tor, because I think that's not
please.
So the reason why Fusion really requires Tor is to hide the information from the server. So whoever's running the server, we don't want the server to be able to know anything, because not only could they spy on us, but also if there was that possibility, then it would kind of become a kind of a honeypot where there'd be some kind of perverse incentive for, like, let's say the government to try to want to set up a server. And so the fact that it's done in such a way where the server learns nothing is really important. And Tor enables that, because in the most basic form, what you're doing in Fusion is you're just sending a bunch of all your inputs and outputs to the server. Then the server sends them back to everyone, and then you sign it, you provide your signatures, and then send it back to the server. So if it wasn't done with Tor, the server could just look at the IP address of each of the incoming pieces of information. So you kind of send each input and output separately, but if you were just doing it over like ClearNet or whatever, not Tor, then they could just look at the IP address. So the purpose of Tor is just to hide the information from the server. Now, the thing when we talk about Tor integration, how it works now with Alpha is you actually have to start Tor. Like, you have to run the Tor browser on your computer and then start the Electron Cash wallet. So that is pretty much, it's not a great user experience, and we don't want to require users to do that, because most users are, the majority of people, we can't count on them being, technically minded, or, we want it to be friendly to non-technical people. We don't want to tell them, oh, you got to run Tor browser and blah, 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 blah. You just want to open the wallet and it works, right? That's what we want. So that's what Axel Gembe is working on right now, and he's an awesome coder as well. And so big shout out to him for doing that for us. So we're, we want to get that into the wallet, and that's it's just gonna be like, it's really the big step that we need to get from an alpha software to beta. There's a couple other things we want to do too, but once we do that and get it in good shape, then we're gonna do what we did in Cash Shuffle and do a professional audit, and then then we'll release it. So it's probably a few short months away from being in production, hopefully.
Yeah, that was my next question, and I've learned enough working around you guys and kind of observing your witchcraft here to know that if there's a push, kind of an arbitrary manufactured rush to ship this stuff, it often doesn't either live up to expectations, or there's things that on the back end people really wanted to solve before they made live. So I appreciate the time and the care that goes into all of your work.
To be honest, my tendency would be to like rush it out sooner than later. So other people, we all kind of balance each other out, which is a great thing. So, smart people are, telling me, no, you can't rush this out. Let's do it right. It's better that it's a little bit late, but it's like awesome. So that's kind of what happened with Cash Shuffle. We did the audit. We just really made sure to just do a great job. And So I'm, I'm glad that there's people in the community that are kind of keeping me in check and just kind of rushing things out, because that's kind of my I like to start fires and I like to do things fast, and that's not always the best way to do it. So
Yeah, move fast, break things.
yeah. So it's hopefully we're getting the best of both worlds, moving fast and not breaking anything.
Very, very cool. And so we can look for CashFusion to, I would assume, presumably at least first, once it's ready to ship, it'll make its way to the Electron Cash wallet, right?
Right. But other wallet teams more than welcome to reach out, and we'd love to see it in as many wallets as we can.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
It's not about Electron Cash being the best wallet. It's about Bitcoin Cash being the best money. So, yeah, let's get it into the Bitcoin.com wallet, and any other wallet that wants to do it. Now, it might be hard to do on mobile because for a couple of reasons. So, for one thing, just having Tor on mobile could be challenging. The other thing is it's not easy. It's not always easy to run things in the background, especially on iPhone, on iOS. The way they have set up things, it's not. They don't really like things running in the background too much, so that could be a challenge. But one really good workaround is what you do is you run Fusion on your desktop and just leave that open, and then you have the same seed on your mobile phone, so you can have it shuffling from your computer and then spending on your phone when you're going around.
That's a really interesting proposition.
Yeah.
So very, very cool. Go ahead.
Yeah, and there might be also some kind of hybrid things. Like I don't know what Bitcoin.com is going to do, but they may do something where it's kind of like some of the parts of Fusion could happen on their back end RPC or something like that. So there's sort of like another privacy concern when it comes to wallets, which is like, in Electron Cash, you're kind of trusting that whatever Electron server you connect to isn't spying on you as well.
Right.
So you can do all the shuffling you want, but if the server you're connecting to is spying on you, it kind of defeats all that. So there's different. That's kind of a longer term thing where we can. One solution is we can try to have the different addresses that are being watched kind of split up among different Electron servers. Also, there's if we can get the Electron protocol into some full nodes, then there can be more servers, so that'll help. Then there's also the neutrino stuff, which kind of takes a different approach. So there's different ways that we can work on this, but there's still a lot of work to be done in general with privacy wallets. Anyway, I just to make a roundabout loop to what I was saying about Bitcoin.com wallet. So they're already kind of it's already a centralized RPC that's giving you your balances. So adding a little bit of centralization there isn't going to hurt privacy any more than it does. So if they add some stuff to make Fusion happen on the back end for mobile, that could be a possibility as well.
Very cool. And I think what listeners will take away from our episode here, if I can be so bold as to presume, is that the sort of the aggregate privacy literacy is being raised, and more people are thinking about it. And so I appreciate your not saying, "Oh, this is a catch-all. This solves it. We're done. Everybody can go home now. Everything's private." Like you're constantly say, "Oh, what if and then and either," and you're constantly doing that. And I think that's very, very important, so people understand that this work is always contingent. It is ongoing. The technology is evolving, and maybe the first line of defense is to understand, pretty much everything you do online is traceable, tractable, and you need to maybe operate with that in mind first, and then try to incorporate privacy tools as they make sense, but not to take undue chances or to have too much trust, because you can see somebody stealing your concept, calling it CashFusion or, whatever, this is the better new improved version, and people, incorporating that malware, thinking, well, I'm free now. I've got this privacy tool, and inadvertently sending everything to a centralized server, or, and so on.
Right.
So these are all. Go ahead.
I think there was like a story not that long ago about, I forget what kind of, it was like some kind of like scam or heist, and then they tried to like mix the coins through Wasabi, then they ended up consolidating all of them, and and then some blockchain analysis kind of showed what happened. So I think with that, it's like just the sheer amount of Bitcoins, and this was like on BTC, but just like the sheer amount of Bitcoins that they were trying to mix, like you can't hide that amount unless you kind of like do it slowly in pieces over time. So it's kind of a good thing as far as like stopping crime and stuff. Like everyday people can still have privacy, but if you're trying to like launder $1 billion, it's just, you're not gonna be able to do it. So that's probably a good thing. And maybe in the future when it's world money, like $1 billion won't be that much, but that is a good kind of like natural limitation of the technology, is like, if you have a super large heist, it's not going to be easy to launder that, even if you have a really good coin join solution like CashFusion. So,
yeah, that's an interesting organic governor there.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. I know you hate Twitter, so I can't send people to follow you on Twitter. But I know, obviously, I think your Medium posts are, mandatory reading, especially if you're concerned with peer-to-peer electronic cash. But where can people follow your work and kind of keep tabs on what you're doing?
So we have an Electron Cash Telegram group that's open to the public. Anyone can join that. You can find the link on electroncash.org. So we usually hang out there, and I also post on Reddit, r/Bitcoin Cash, and also r/BTC. I'm trying to post more in our Bitcoin Cash. Nothing against our BTC, but I think it's important that we also grow our Bitcoin Cash subreddit a little bit more, because I think people that are looking for information about Bitcoin Cash are going to go there. So
very, very cool. Well, wow, that was the great Jonald Fyookball. CashFusion coming soon in a few months, audited out, shipped, ready to go. We think will be something of a game changer for the Bitcoin Cash community. Again, man, Happy New Year. Thanks so much for coming on, and best of luck.
Yeah, thanks, Edward. Hey, take care.